So good morning, Lana, and welcome to today's lesson. Just to remind you what we did in our last lesson in science, we were discussing about the advantages of friction. First, we said friction is the force that opposes motion. That when you're moving this direction, there's another force that is pushing you backwards. That is what we call friction. And we say friction has advantages. Number one, we say friction is used when one is walking between the shoe soles and the ground. Number two, we say the other advantage of friction is when someone is writing, either in the book or on the board. Also, we talked about when one is rubbing, stop, erasing. You need friction between the rubber or the duster and the blackboard or the book. We also said friction is required when one is braking, more especially when the vehicles bring between the brake pad and the rim. We need friction there so that the brake pad can press against the rim and the vehicle can be able to stop. We also talked about on the tarmac road. Vehicles need friction. That's why tarmac roads are not made smooth. They are left rough so that the grip between the tire and the road can be there. And so we talked about treading in vehicles, use of treads, talked about this being a car tire. These are what we call the treads. And we say the importance of these treads is to increase friction. Not to decrease, but to increase. Ensure that there is now friction in the same. Now in our day's lesson, learner, we are going to see the disadvantages. Anything that has an advantage is probably likely to have a disadvantage. So we are going to look at the disadvantages of friction. Why is it that friction is not good? What are the ways in which friction is not an advantage? Number one, friction causes wearing out of objects. Friction causes wearing out of objects. And we are going to mention objects that we can find friction acting upon it. Before we left in our previous lesson, I told you to go and observe your collar at that back end where we have the collar and the neck back part meeting. You realize, most times you realize that those parts are worn out. They wear out and you have to take your shirt to the funding for it to remain. So we're talking about objects like collars of shirts and blouses. We look at them well, sometimes they are worn out. Talk about shoe soles. And this leads to you most of the time falling when it's raining because the ground becomes so wet and smooth. So that when you're walking, you can easily fall down because they are not treads between on the sole part of the shoe, and therefore meaning that the force of friction is reduced between the ground and the shoe sole. Another disadvantage of friction is that it causes unwanted heat. You will realize that sometimes, and I told you to rub your palms against one another, you feel that is what friction causes. I'm sure you have seen, maybe when you go to a country where you're using a wheelbarrow, and that wheelbarrow, sometimes you find that the axle, or even the tire itself, at the point where there's a hole, that point is always, the hole becomes larger and larger every time. Every time you do some work, the hole enlarges because part of that hole, that is the metallic part and the axle, there is a friction between them. And so the hole becomes bigger every time until a mechanic will be called to come and just do some welding on that particular part. So we're talking about if you touch on that part after the wheelbarrow has carried some work, you realize that that part is very hot. So friction produces unwanted heat. We also say that friction causes unwanted sound. You can talk about noise. When you are pushing that wheelbarrow, which is not greased or oil, you hear some noise from that particular wheelbarrow, meaning that there is something that is wrong. The metallic parts are coming one another, and therefore they likely produce that sound. We also say the major problem with friction is that it makes work difficult. It makes work difficult. And how is work made difficult? Now you realize that you can never reduce the amount of work, but you can use levers or tools to make work easier. And that's why we are talking about making work easier in this chapter. That we cannot reduce the amount of work, but we can make it done efficiently. Like for example, if you want to carry 50 kg of maize, 50 kg bag of maize, you can decide to carry using your own arms, or place it in a wheelbarrow and push it. Now, when you are carrying it with your own arms and hands, you find it difficult. It's too heavy for you to be able to carry. But whenever you place it in the wheelbarrow, while pushing, you realize that there's a change, meaning that you're using less effort. So what we are saying is that by us saying that friction makes work difficult, is that the work that you're doing, instead of using machine to become efficient, it becomes difficult because you're using a lot of force to do a particular job. So whenever we have friction and we are pushing this block of wood towards this direction X, and friction is there pushing it towards the opposite direction, you feel you're using a lot of force for you to be able to push. Assuming this friction was not there, then the work would be very easy. You'll be pushing it at top ease because there's no friction which is pushing it back. That is exactly what we say. And this is a major point. The main reason why friction is an advantage because it makes work difficult. Every time you want to work with friction, you're required to use excess force for you to be able to carry out that particular work. I also want to mention something before I forget about the force that's used to do a particular work. Now, for you to be able to do work, if you want to do work and do it well, then you come in, for example, because most of the time we say the work that you are doing is like an incoming force. If you want to lift that, this is a wheelbarrow. Though I'm going to talk about this later, but I'm assuming that is a wheelbarrow. So we have a load here. This load here is the work that you want to do. So this work is becoming difficult because the work pushes this wheelbarrow downwards. So for you to be able to carry out this work, you must produce a force that is to the opposite of this. So that's why you hold the wheelbarrow here and you lift it. Later you don't press the wheelbarrow for you to be able to work. You lift it to counteract this type of force. Look at the force the way it is. So the incoming force, which is the force of the Lord, presses down, meaning that the work is moved towards the downward movement, and then you must use force that is the opposite of this for you to be able to counteract this work. Now, this force that you use for you to be able to carry out that work, the force that you use must be more than the incoming force, and directly opposite. This is a question in an exam, and that's why I'm stressing on it. That the force that you're using to be able to do work must be more. For you to be able to lift this 50 kg of bag of weights, you cannot bring a kg1 people to come and do this work. Because the force that people can be able to produce is less compared to this 50 kg. So you must bring a person who is bigger and who can produce force that is more than 50 kg. That is going to be 50 newtons. So we are saying this person must produce force that is more than the load, and the force must be in the opposite direction, and should be directly opposite. Meaning that if the force is coming like this, there is no way you can apply the force like this, because you cannot attack this one. You want to counter-attack this one. So you produce the opposite of that, a directly opposite, and this one should be more. So let us take note of that particular question and it comes in the exam. So for you to be able to, you'll be asked in an exam, for one to be able to do some work, then they give you the answers there. So the opposite applied must be in the opposite direction and more than the incoming force for you to be able to counterattack someone. If a person comes with a bicycle and you want to stop them by pressing them on the steering wheel, if you are not having enough energy, that person will just push you because they are big. You cannot stop a person who is bigger than you using a less force. I hope you understand that now. So this is very, very important, and get it clear so that anytime it comes in an exam, you can be able to get it right. So we are saying that these are the four major disadvantages of friction, unless there's one I've left, but I think there's no one that I've left. So this is exactly what you're not supposed to forget. So the disadvantages and advantages of friction comes in an exam. It's a must that you get them right. So later in our next lesson, we are going to say ways of increasing friction. How can we increase friction? How can we make friction more? How can we reduce it? So we are going to see that in our next lesson. So have a blessed day. Take note of these. Bless them in your notes. Ensure every time you are reading. And may God bless you.